Hey everyone, it's Melissa from Welcome to the Woods. In my last video, you saw me talk about the grading issues and the water damage we've had on this side of our lake house. I've replaced the rotted siding, but now it's time to take care of the grading. We excavated out almost 2 yards of earth from this side of the house, and we're going to have to build a big retaining wall to keep back the rest from eroding. Now, I hope that this video can be helpful for you to learn a bit about how to build a retaining wall and to just see that while it is a big project, you can do it yourself. To get started on our retaining wall, we planned out where we want to build it. It's going to be an L shape, and dug a trench that was about 10 inches wide. We had this pipe from our sprinkler system running through, so we're going to make sure to place the wall around that, and we dug it down deep enough that the paver base is going to cover it completely. So in the trench, we're going to fill paver base to be at least 4 inches thick. This is going to give the retaining wall a steady base to build on top of that won't shift and move around. So for this project, I actually have help from my father-in-law, Don, and he has built a few retaining walls in the past, so I really appreciate his help on this project, not only for his strength, but his knowledge as well. So the paver base, you're going to want to have a pretty uniform thickness, but you're also going to want to make sure that it is basically level. It doesn't have to be perfect, but in order to do that, you simply fill your paver base thick into your trench, and then you screed it. We used a 2x4, just moving it across the surface to get it mostly flattened and level. Then you check it with a long level, ideally at least 4 feet or 6 feet long, and you adjust as necessary, tamping the paver base down. If you don't tamp your paver base down, it's not going to be as solid and unmoving as you need in order to build a retaining wall on top of it. Before I lay my blocks, I'm also checking level the short direction of the trench and adjusting as needed, just to make sure one side isn't like a lot higher than the other. Now you'll see I'm using a WorkPro level. WorkPro levels are some of my favorites because they're so lightweight, aluminum, and WorkPro is actually sponsoring this video. I have tons of their tools I use all the time, especially their workbench, which I'll talk about a little bit later. WorkPro is currently running a big back-to-school sale on their site, so just visit that by clicking on the link in the description on this video to check them out. Once your paver base has been prepared, you can start laying your block. Just set your first row wherever you want to start and pound it into the paver base using a rubber mallet. If you use a heavier type of hammer, you might risk cracking the cement block. Use your short level to check horizontal and vertical. Placing the first row of blocks is so important. I can't stress how important it is to get this row level because the whole rest of the wall depends on it. Laying the first row is the majority of the work in building a retaining wall, so it might feel tedious and like it's taking forever, but after this, the project goes a lot faster. As you start to get multiple blocks in a row, you want to make sure you're also using a longer level across all the blocks in succession to make sure that it's level all the way across. You can adjust your paver base and you can tamp on the concrete blocks to make it work, but you have to get them all level before moving on. Now you might wonder where I'm getting all these blocks. There's actually these circle gardens with retaining wall block around them in the front of the lake house property. So we're actually stealing them from there. It was so nice not to have to haul them all. So here you'll see a clip of Don using this cement saw. You can rent one of these big saws. This is kind of an overkill size. You can get them smaller, but you can rent these from a general rental. We actually had a neighbor who works in concrete, so he lent this big one to us. This is going to cut the concrete block in half because your second row, you're going to want to start with a half block. And every other row, you start with a half block so that you can actually stagger the seams and make your wall extra strong. This video is sponsored by WorkPro tools. Throughout this project, you'll see me use WorkPro tools because of their ingenuity and power. My favorite has been the 5-in-1 workbench. You can adjust the height and transform it to do so many things. I've used it the most as a scaffolding to work more safely when renovating. The wheels and casters allow it to transform to a dolly or a creeper for mechanic work. I've used it this way as a rolling platform to move things around with ease. It can become a workbench top with storage for your tools and helpful measurements handy. Add the included rails and the workbench even becomes a sliding miter saw stand. And if you're wiser than me and have your miter saw hooked into a shop vac, there's a whole power strip right on the side. Check out WorkPro tools by clicking on the link in the description of this video, and for a limited time, get 15% off this versatile workbench with my discount code. After your first row is laid, you can start thinking about drainage behind the wall. You're not ready for P-rock yet, but you are ready for drain tile. So this corrugated pipe has slits across it that it let water escape, and you can see we created an attachment so that we can have an arm that goes behind this section of the wall, and then when it turns, we have a long piece of the pipe that runs the length of the long side of the wall. So this is going to get a special product on it called a drain sleeve, which prevents the drain tile from clogging. It's kind of like a mesh fabric. And I'm just going to slip that right over the corrugated pipe. And this is going to prevent it from clogging, and it's going to help it work more efficiently. Well-functioning drainage behind the wall like this is going to prevent erosion and possible failure of the wall in the future. Subsequent layers of block that gets laid on top of the first row are quite easy. All you have to do is stagger them halfway across the previous block and then feel for that lip in the back and make sure that that's pressed all the way up against the back of the previous row. You can see me feeling for it here and pulling the block forward till it stops. When you're done placing all your block to the height of your wall, you can fill behind with P-rock. We filled with a lot of P-rock that fully covered our drain tile and went all the way up to a couple inches shy of the top of the wall. Then we filled on top of that with black dirt, making sure that we sloped the black dirt away from the wall. The point of both of these things is so that water doesn't come up against the wall frequently, and if it does, it can drain through the soil down and away without causing erosion. For our wall, we chose to do top caps. This is optional. You wouldn't need to. This is just to make the top look a little nicer. So I was placing these, and then I got to the corner and I was really perplexed on what to do. I didn't know how to go about that, but Dawn had the great idea of cutting two blocks at a 45-degree angle and connecting those together so that it creates a turn, and then just building off of the corner. So I would say that that worked wonderfully, and if you have a similar issue, start with your most difficult cuts, do those first, and build off of that. Now that the wall was finally built, we had a significant more landscaping to do. I raked all the rock back above the wall, kind of where the AC unit is, and this we sloped away from the house and towards the drain tile, so towards the corner of the wall. We also did more excavating where the retaining wall is keeping soil back from coming up near the house. You can see that we drew a line that slopes down towards the backyard, and we also sloped the earth away from the wall and away from the house. We created kind of a gully in between. This isn't going to be super visible once we put the rock there. What actually matters is the way that the soil is sloped, because the soil is packed and the water is just going to run right through the rock. You can see on this project, even my husband decided to join in and help with the landscaping. So while the boys were digging out more earth, I decided to move forward with the poly layer. This thick black poly is going to get laid down underneath the rock that we replace. This is going to prevent weeds from growing up, it's going to prevent erosion, and it's just a good practice whenever you're landscaping with rocks. We measured the width of this area that we need to lay the poly and realized that we could just double it up. I think I bought a roll that was 8 feet by 100 feet, so it's going to be folded in half, double thick, and laid here to protect this area from getting wrecked after all the hard work we put into it. Next was to replace the rock on top of the poly, and my landscaping here is almost done. One more quick mention that you want to have the earth, the landscaping, whatever you're doing, come up about halfway to the height of the first row of blocks. I also decided to take some landscape adhesive, this is PL 500, to glue down all the top caps. Now, I did not do this with each layer of block. Sometimes when people build retaining walls, they put construction adhesive between each layer, but I decided to just put adhesive on the top caps since that's like the decorative area I don't want moving around, and they finish off the wall nicely, and I personally feel adhesive on each row is unnecessary. You can see for our retaining wall design, I decided to step it down. That's because the earth slopes down towards the backyard here, and I thought it would look weird to have it all really tall at the end. But you can also see that we just used that cement saw to cut the top caps so that they ended up flush at the end of every retaining wall block layer. So it all looks intentional even as the wall steps down. This is how the wall looks from up on top by the AC unit when we're all done. I am so happy to not have to worry about grading issues on this side of the house anymore, and I know now with the retaining wall and the replaced siding that we're not going to have continuous water damage against the house like we have in the past. I am so grateful to my father-in-law Don for all his help on this project, and I hope that we showed you some tips and tricks if you're trying to build your own retaining wall too. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to hit subscribe on Welcome to the Woods to see what I'm up to next. I'm doing a full exterior makeover on this house, so there's a lot to come.